Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are super happy and excited to have you with us today in our first curated conversation. Before starting, I'm going to share some tips for the interpretation. We have an amazing team of interpreters with us today. So if you see at the end of your screen, you will have your meeting controls. So please check and click in interpretation, and you can select there the language that you would like to listen. So if you speak English, please select English. You will be hearing directly the people that speak English in English, and the translation of others speaking other language in English as well. Please click also mute original audio there, so you will be able to better listen and understand everything. And if you speak English but also understand Spanish, you can click off in the interpretation setting and you will be able to listen everybody in their own language. Entonces, buenos días, buenas tardes, bienvenidos a nuestra primera conversación. Explicando ahora, antes de iniciar, un poco algunas técnicas para que podamos escuchar y usar las herramientas de interpretación para la llamada. Verán que abajo en su pantalla tienen los distintos iconos del menú y hay uno que dice interpretación. Ahí verán los distintos idiomas. Por favor, seleccionen español, Spanish, y también marquen Mute Original Audio. Así van a poder escuchar mejor. Si aparte de español entienden inglés, si quieren escuchar a las compañeras hablando inglés directamente, pueden marcar off en la interpretación y así van a escuchar mejor. Voy al français. Soyez les bienvenus, on est très content de vous avoir avec nous aujourd'hui dans cette première conversation. C'est une petite introduction de comment utiliser les outils d'interprétation pour l'appel d'aujourd'hui. Alors, si vous parlez français, je vais vous demander de cliquer dans les petits ronds d'interprétation à la fin de au bas de votre écran. Et là-bas, soyez, s'il vous plaît, de choisir la langue que vous voulez entendre. Alors, vous pouvez mettre là le français. Et aussi, s'il vous plaît, de mettre aussi des mute original audio, comme ça, vous allez mieux comprendre tout. Et aussi, si à part de français, vous comprenez l'espagnol et l'anglais, et vous voulez entendre directement des participants, vous pouvez mettre les off dans l'interprétation et comme ça, vous entendez directement. Si vous avez un problème ou quelque chose, il y a Shui avec nous. Aujourd'hui, vous pouvez l'écrire dans les chats pour lui dire quelque chose. How to change to English. So, I'm coming back to English again. So those who want to listen to English, you go to the interpretation button at the end of your screen and you select English. You will hear everybody speaking in English and the translation of the people that speak in other languages in English. How it works, we are going to remind how to do this if there are people that come in a little later today. To the conversation. Welcome everybody again. Bienvenida, bienvenides. I'm Sayele Belbeni.
Thank you, Nani, so much for making this exciting global conversation happen in 3 languages. So it's not easy to pull off, but we're here. And so I hope you're all able to use the interpretation. So if there's any questions, I'm sure Nani is mentioned, to please add them in the chat and we'll have an AWID staff responding. So welcome, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. My name is Tenzin Dolker and it is truly a pleasure to be your moderator today for this skills share. And I'm calling from Chicago in the US. I'd love to see where everyone is calling from. I know we have a full representation from all the different regions. So really excited to have you all join us. At AWID, I work on the Resourcing Feminist Movements team where I lead our project, Where's the Money for Feminist Organizing, and our recent work on autonomous resourcing. Before we go to the discussions with our wonderful speakers, a few logistics. This call is for 1.5 hours. For any access tech issues, please message on chat. Available also in Spanish and French. Our wonderful IT staff, Juhi, will be on hand to provide support. We will be using a few interactive tools today, such as the Zoom poll, the chat function. As I see, it's already very interactive, and then an external tool called Menti. So please make sure that you are connected to your computers if possible, so you can fully participate in this interactive skills share. We have an amazing artist, Noe, who is a live portraitist, and she will be live drawing some of the speakers, and we will be using this art in the future publications about autonomous resourcing, and there is the gallery view option, so you can see Noe live paint the speakers. So please check it out and see her magic live with us. And please be aware that we have muted your mics and turned off your cameras for security reasons. But we feel free to really post any of your reactions in the chat and the Q&A, again, in all 3 languages, and we are monitoring them very, very closely. So I hope you're all feeling really excited as I am, and to get you all ready to participate in some of these interactive tools, we have our first poll. And of course, we'll take a minute or two. You will see our first poll to check the mood in this virtual global room that we're in with no one other than Prince. If you can just respond in number 1 through 7 that best reflects your current mood according to Prince's many expressions. We would love to see how everyone is feeling. And thank you to Nino, who is a young feminist partner at AWID, who created this activity with her friend Ingrid. So we're really grateful for Nino for bringing in this really fun activity to see how folks are feeling today with the presentation. So we'll take a minute or two to see how folks are feeling. I see a lot of ones. Okay, so we got a lot of 1. We are excited to listen, so we definitely have that. So I really excited to see how much folks are feeling. Prince's mood number 1. We also have number 5, feeling a little sassy and ready to rock and roll, and a little, you know, so that's great. Thank you so much, Ritu, for launching that poll. So we will now go to my wonderful colleague, Kimberly, to introduce herself and share a bit about how we're going to be engaging with each other today, and sort of the broader feminist realities journey at AWID that this skills share is a part of. So thank you so much, Kimberly, for stepping in truly last minute. We're so excited to have you here with us. And so over to you, Kimberly.
Thank you, Tenzin, and hi, everyone. So as Tenzin said, my name is Kimberly, and I work as part of the Co-Creating Feminist Realities initiative, as well as the forum team at AWID. And I'm really, really excited to share this space with you all today. So as we continue to think about how we want to communicate and build communities online, it's really important that we reflect on a few principles of engagement in order to ensure that the online space invites all of us and also challenges all of us to really operate and think from a place of courage, curiosity, generosity, but also really importantly, shared responsibility. So we are inviting all of you to really reflect on this and to try and materialize and manifest this as we continue with this online call today. We really invite you to be present as much as possible. We recognize that so much is happening in our lives, but really, really actively listen to what the speakers are sharing They have generously given their time to help us think through these really important topics. Because you're all muted, there won't be any interruption, but you can also be present by really showing up in the chat and engaging with each other. We also invite all of you to value all forms of knowledge, recognizing that knowledge shows up in multiple ways, and there's no one way of knowing. And so we just encourage you to celebrate and value all forms of knowledge. We also want to invite curiosity into the space and to really ask thoughtful questions that are rooted in a place of deep inquiry and care. And also sometimes a question comes to our mind and we want to dive into it right away, but maybe think, how does this question really contribute to the collective conversation? Access is really important to us, and we're sure it's important to you. We want to make sure that we are creating a space that is accessible, that is open, that is welcoming of folks from various backgrounds, abilities, experiences, and beliefs. And if at any time you feel like your access needs are being compromised, we do invite you to jump into the chat, and one of the AWID staff will be able to support you around that as best as we can. And so I think that's really some of the key things. Let me make sure I've mentioned all. I believe so. So now we'll just speak a bit about the co-creating feminist realities journey broadly. For us at AWID, it really is a political project. And this conversation today is part of a series of what we are calling curated conversations. And these curated conversations are really designed in a way to expand the boundaries of online learning and online spaces, where we're really trying to be intentional about integrating creative and participatory formats so that as close as possible, we can have really meaningful connections, even online and across different contexts and time zones. And so these conversations that we're having right now are just one step along our feminist realities journey as we build excitedly towards the next AWID forum. And we know that feminist movements for decades, for centuries even, have really built and designed courageously propositions and solutions so that we can have a just world. And we understand these propositions, these solutions to be feminist realities that are not only possible, but that exist right now. And so we understand them to be a range of existing practices that people and communities are creating, ideas that they're like thinking deeply about, and the ways in which that they are resisting oppressive systems, but also creating practices of liberation and solidarity. So the curated conversations are really about exchanging, debating, and learning together about the different ways in which we are creating feminist realities. And we just want to remind you that if you are communicating outward using social media, for example, if you can use our hashtags, which are feminist realities, as well as autonomous resourcing, given today's topic. So I'll pass it back over to Tenzin.
Great, thank you so much, Kimberly. We really appreciate that wonderful sort of overarching and curated conversation journey that we're all on, and how this autonomous resourcing skills share fits directly into this. So before we turn to the speakers, we do want to hear from you a little bit more about how you're thinking about autonomous resourcing and what speaks to you. So we're going to take one more poll and answer the following question. So unfortunately, we don't have the option to translate them, the polls, into the poll itself, but I will be speaking and reading the answers, the options, and the translators will be translating them. So I will share with you the question. So our next poll number 2 is, have you or the movement you've been engaged with practiced autonomous resourcing? Have you or the movement you've been engaged with practiced autonomous resourcing? 1, no, I have no idea what that is. 2, maybe we don't call it autonomous resourcing, Tenzin, but we definitely self-resource our activism. 3, yes, our work relies mostly on autonomous resourcing. So those are the 3 options. Would love to hear how you're feeling about autonomous resourcing and whether you've engaged with resourcing your feminist realities and movements autonomously. So 1, no, I don't have any idea. 2, maybe we self-resource our activism. And 3, yes, definitely our work relies heavily on autonomous resourcing. So let's look at the results. That's great. Wow. So there's an overwhelming response to number 2, which resonates with a lot of you. Over 58%, 65 of you have said that maybe we don't call it autonomous resourcing, but we definitely self-resource our activism. That's really phenomenal. And that's what we've been hearing so much. And that's why I think we are here today to really co-create this conceptual framework and really fill it in with all of the different practices that you all coordinate and organize daily. So we want to really name that. So that's really a stark response. So thank you, Ritu, for launching that poll. One last activity, I promise, before we get to the speakers. We have this external tool called Menti. If you can go to menti.com, and my wonderful colleague Cecile will be sharing the links and the details, and it's also in your screen, menti.com, and the digit code is 258689. Again, menti.com, digit code 258689. And the question is, in one word, what comes to mind when you hear autonomous resourcing? So a lot of you have responded to number 2 in the previous poll, which is really interesting that you acknowledge that you self-resource your activism. So we want to hear from you now. Really, what word comes to your mind? I mean, at AWID we have a number of deliberations. We've talked about what autonomous resourcing means, and a few of our feminist partners, but we want to hear from 176 of you in this global virtual room. So what's the word? Autonomous resourcing, what does that mean? What does that speak to you? So let's take a minute, and we will be able to see the live results as well. Ritu will be sharing her screen where we will be able to see the live results. So let's see. Okay. We're seeing, wow, that's really interesting that I see freedom, independence. Independence is a lot, and feel free to write them in Spanish and French as well. Even though I'm not able to translate them right now, I'm sure Nani will be reviewing this with Cecile, and we'll bring it in during the Q&A when she's going to be reflecting on some of the comments and questions in the chat. So please feel free to write in French and Spanish as well. So we see a lot of independence and freedom, which really speaks to autonomous resourcing. So we will see how our speakers have been thinking about autonomous resourcing, but it's wonderful to see that there's a pretty strong consensus that that it means independence, which is beautiful. So thank you so much for participating in these interactive tools that we've been innovating and working with. So now we're going to dive right into autonomous resourcing, and I'm so excited to be here to invite our 4 phenomenal feminist activists from different parts of the globe on their experiences on how to mobilize resources that are truly autonomous, self-generated by and for feminist movements. So I'm so excited to welcome Eka Imerlishvili from Independent Feminist Network of Georgia, We have Luti, Brenes from Beso Diverso. We have Nani Zulminarni from Pekka. And we have Victoria Tesoriero from National Campaign for Legal Abortion. I will ask them to come on camera if they're not, and briefly to just share a little bit about yourself, your feminist activism, and the movements you're a part of, and where you're calling from today. So I will turn over to Eka, and then Luti, Nani, and Victoria. So Eka, over to you.
Thank you, Tenzin. Hello, everyone. I am super excited to be part of the Autonomous Resourcing Skillshare webinar today, together with my fellow activists from Argentina, Costa Rica, and Indonesia. Huge thanks goes to the marvelous AWID team for giving us the opportunity to be part of this webinar and give us also a pleasure to speak with you all today. I'm a native of Georgia, a beautiful country with quite a proud history of feminist activism, and walking in the footsteps of the amazing trailblazer feminist activists of late 19th century Georgia. I represent an independent group of feminists, a non-hierarchical, non-formal feminist collective. We are excited to be scheduled for our 10-year anniversary this upcoming year. And today I'm calling from Midwest, United States. Thank you. Can't wait to start the conversation. Over.
Thank you, Eka. Over to you, Nani, or Luti, and then Nani.
Hey everyone, good morning from my side of the world. I'm calling you from beautiful Costa Rica, so you're gonna have a good day. So I'm fairly new to activism.
During we wait,
I'm part of this.
for Nani to, during we wait for Nani to talk, there's some comments that the French translation is not working very well. I don't know, Nadine, if you can please talk a little bit harder so people can follow up. Thank you.
Thank you, Dani. Sorry
Okay,
about that, Luti.
No worries, are we set? All good? Okay. So yeah, I'm part of, I've been participating in Beso Diverso for around 4 years, and now about a year ago, I'm actually working with the organization, and what we do is that we promote the exercise of human rights, against fighting against violence and discrimination for gender identity and sexual orientation, everything for pleasure. So welcome all, and I'm so happy to share our crazy ideas for autonomous resourcing.
Thank you so much, Luti. Just FYI, I don't know if it's just for me, but your connection is a little bit rusty, so we were able to hear most of what you were saying, but just a little static in the background. So just FYI that there is a little bit with the Wi-Fi, Luti. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, Nani, over to you.
Hello, good evening. Thank you, Tenzin, and thank you, AWID, for organizing this. My name is Nani Zulminarni. I'm from Pekka, Women-Headed Family Empowerment Movement of Women-Headed Family in Indonesia. I'm calling from Jakarta. This is evening now in Jakarta. Super excited to have this conversation, and thank you, AWID, for consistently promoting this autonomous resourcing for our feminist movement all over the world. Thank you, Tenzin.
Thank you, Nani, for joining at such late hour as well. Thank you. Over to you, Victoria.
Bueno, buen día. Muchísimas gracias a AWID y especialmente a Tenzin por la organización de esta actividad. Estoy muy contenta de participar con otras compañeras. Soy Victoria Tesoriero, soy de Argentina. Argentina tiene una larga tradición de organización autónoma de los feminismos, de las mujeres, así que bueno, estoy muy contenta de participar y poder contar.
Thank you, Victoria. So before I go to my the questions, just give you a little bit context to autonomous resourcing, what how we've been thinking about autonomous resourcing internally at AWID and with a few of our feminist partners, including Eka and Luti, who've been engaged with us over the last 2 years or so, when we've been hearing so much about how movements are really self-generating their own sort of organizing and resourcing. So we've been really digging deeply within this conceptual framework. So I want to share a little bit about how AWID got to this current moment before I turn to the speakers with my first question. So we have been creating this, co-creating this framework, autonomous resourcing, with partners for a little bit. And when we think about and calculate sort of the time and the energy and money activists put into our organizing and our movements, we realize that traditional forms of funding covers a very small percentage of our true costs. So for instance, recent reports by Mama Cash and Estrella found that most of the LBQ movements and activists have budgets below $5,000. So what this and so many other pieces of research about the state of funding feminist movements tells us is what we already know from our feminist realities, that feminist, queer, radical social justice activism is mostly self-funded. And beyond a few larger resourced NGOs, autonomous resourcing actually seems to be the norm and not the exception. So for us at AWID, autonomous resourcing really speaks to sort of the radical love and commitment and care that we have for each other within our feminist movements. And so we're conceptualizing autonomous resourcing as really the transformative ways which our movements and activists really mobilize resources beyond just money and beyond a hyper sort of capitalist framework in thinking about crafting social change and social justice to really include knowledge, human contributions, our connections, our solidarity for each other. And for us, autonomous resourcing really is that independence that a lot of you have shared earlier in self-managing and self-generating and agenda setting and driving some of the most innovative and needed actions taking place today in our for our feminist social transformations. So in a sense, in this current moment that we live in, really historic and uncertain, but so much mutual aid and solidarity mobilizations taking place during COVID really seems to be building on a long tradition of grassroots, working class, and feminist movement solidarity work. So thank you all so much for joining this global conversation and the opportunity to learn new skills together about autonomous resourcing. We have 4 phenomenal activists. And so I would now like to come back to our speakers who are generously sharing their skills and learning and experiences and analysis with us today. I will turn to Victoria, Eka, Luti, and Nani, and ask you the first question and say, can you please share with us some concrete examples of autonomous resourcing practice that you've seen and you've been working with and with the movements that you are a part of? And what are the opportunities that autonomous resourcing offers? But also, should we be thinking about some of the risks and the challenges? So before we go into sort of the political discussion of really the frame, let's hear a little bit more about really the specific examples that you've been seeing and you've been co-creating. So I'll ask Victoria, because you've been thinking a lot about this over the last few years, and then I'll ask Eka, Luti, and Nani. So Victoria, so I'll pass the mic over to you right now.
Bueno,
thank you.
Muchas gracias. Yo quería contar la experiencia del Encuentro Nacional de Mujeres en Argentina. El Encuentro Nacional de Mujeres es como la base de nuestro movimiento federal. Se empezó a organizar en el año 1986 y contó con la presencia de 1000 mujeres y hoy cuenta con la asistencia de 100.000 mujeres cada año. Yo quiero mostrar unas fotos para que dimensionen, bueno, no sé si voy a poder mostrar, pero para que dimensionen la cantidad de gente que va al encuentro de mujeres. En cada año se hace en una provincia distinta, en un fin de semana, en el mes de octubre, todo el año, desde marzo, nos empezamos a organizar para juntar plata para viajar al Encuentro Nacional de Mujeres. Y para eso, ahí está nuestra organización para juntar recursos, hacemos eventos, vendemos comida, hacemos peñas, hacemos distintas actividades que nos permitan juntar el dinero para alquilar los colectivos, los buses para ir hasta la provincia. En cada provincia donde se organiza el encuentro cada año hay una comisión organizadora de las feministas de esa provincia que garantizan que estén disponibles las escuelas de la ciudad, las escuelas públicas, para dormir, para que las mujeres durmamos ahí, y también escuelas para donde se realizan los talleres de discusión. Hay más de 100 temas que discutimos la agenda del movimiento cada año con la participación de mujeres de todos los sectores, sindicalistas, universitarias, organizaciones de base, militantes de distintos lugares, feministas autónomas, independientes, de todo tipo de organizaciones, y este evento es para muchas el ingreso al feminismo, la sensibilización con la agenda de mujeres, y nos ha dado un movimiento federal. Y yo creo que para nosotras no es un límite la falta de recursos, a diferencia de otros movimientos, por ejemplo el sindicalismo, que se financia con la cuota de cada afiliado, o los movimientos de la economía social, que se financian con las cooperativas y también se financian con el Estado. El movimiento feminista es absolutamente distinto porque se financia con organización y también con alianzas, ¿no? Con alianzas con otras organizaciones, como por ejemplo sindicatos. Nosotras cuando movilizamos pedimos mucho a los sindicatos que nos presten cosas como escenarios, como sonido, cosas para la movilización. Y logramos cosas increíbles, como en el 2018 cuando se debatió el aborto legal, logramos una concentración de 2 millones de personas, ¿sí? Todo organizado de manera autónoma, sin recursos.
Disculpa,
O
Victoria,
sea, solamente
te interrumpo
80.
solo un segundito.
Sí.
Perdón, solo un minuto. Nadine, si puedes, Nadine, si tu peux élever ton micro, parce que comme ça on ne peut pas entendre Iris quand il fait la traducción en français de Victoria. Désolé. Perdón, Victoria, continúa, por favor. Lo siento.
Está bien. No, y esto nos da la posibilidad de pensarnos eso, pensar que cualquier objetivo que tengamos lo vamos a organizar y lo vamos a lograr. Y no van a ser un límite la falta de recursos para nosotras. Y bueno, es una tradición un poco heredada, ¿no? de nuestras antecesoras. La autonomía, yo creo que es un concepto muy fuerte y muy importante en todo sentido del movimiento feminista, la búsqueda de la autonomía en todos sus aristas. A veces es muy difícil. Yo creo que a veces el desafío es muy grande y es difícil y requiere una mejor organización, pero sin duda creo que hemos construido un movimiento sólido, que muchas otras organizaciones como que no lo pueden creer, los partidos políticos, por ejemplo, como un movimiento logró este nivel de movilización, este nivel de organización sin recursos, y creo que es nuestra gran fortaleza.
This is phenomenal. Thank you so much, Victoria. This is such powerful testimony to what it means when movements are completely independent and autonomous and self-funding, and how the kind of inclusivity and the kind of organizing and alliance building and coalition building one can really lead. So that's a really great sort of local context that you're able to share, and I think a lot of folks are probably thinking about how that resonates and reflects in their own context as well. So I'll turn over to Eka, if you would also be able to share some concrete examples of autonomous resourcing, self-resourcing that you've been a part of.
Sure, with pleasure. Listening to Victoria, I'm very overwhelmed with all the examples she has given, and it's exciting to know that there are women out there on the other side of the world who are managing to gather so many fellow supporters. That's really impressive. I hope to be part of that gathering maybe one day, especially as maybe our feminist group from Georgia. So when thinking of our group's autonomous resourcing practices, it's probably also worth pointing out that our founding mothers, as we call them, who founded the group 10 years ago, were from the onset very intentional about not registering as a group and not formally registering, exactly for the purposes of avoiding any especially vertical power structures, which obviously has meant that we had been engaged in a lot of autonomous resourcing and self-resourcing over the last 10 years. And that has been a very intentional political decision. And all the members that have come to join the group since, including myself and the group members, have upheld that decision, and we have all been very intentional about it. So with that 10-year history, definitely not as long as the National Women's Gathering, but something. We have engaged in a spectrum of autonomous resourcing practices, and we do like to think of them as a spectrum because some have been more intuitive, more simpler ways of resourcing, and others have been more intentional and intricate. So, your very basic intuitive examples that we started with are members and supporters giving donations, albeit small, sometimes, to buy stationery for various events, posters, stencils. Our members and supporters who volunteer their time have been equally valuable, and we don't want to not call them resources because they are very, very important. Our poster drawing gatherings, including, for example, for Take Back the Night marches, which is something that the group's been doing in the last few years, have been epic and amazing bonding experiences, which I would also like to think as a resource. The ability to bond with other women and pool resources, even that's just time sometimes. Some more intricate examples include reaching out to other groups and movements with similar interests to pool resources together to organize an event that we both or the groups have a shared interest in. In these instances, for example, we have partnered with a local business. Let's say a cafe comes to mind that we would screen a movie and use the space for free, or we would partner with the local feminist fund to give us their space for regular gatherings that the group had. In other instances, we have tapped into our personal connections to rope our photographer friends in, for example, to take photos of the events we organize, or have tapped into our network of acquaintances who we know might have access to certain technology that we need for events, like loudspeakers. We've also obviously seen other movements appeal to musicians and artists and other public figures to leverage their reputation for the events that they are organizing. However, in the last few years, we have matured and become more intentional about autonomous resourcing. And one of the examples of our more mature autonomous resourcing would be our work with feminist researchers and authors, excuse me, to develop text and ultimately put together a tour, a feminist tour of Georgia's capital, Tbilisi. And obviously that helps us generate some resources to fund our activities, but it has also contributed to some sort of like feminist scholarship development as, and of course, rewriting history and you know, making it more just so that all the women who've been part of, you know, modernizing Georgia are acknowledged, and we shout out to them, even if it has taken us 100 years to do so. These opportunities have given our group an enormous freedom to set our own agenda with obviously no strings attached. We have been outspoken on an array of marginal issues that would often, if not always, remain outside the interest and ability of traditional donors to fund. These issues are like, you know, the protesting or speaking up about the increasing and unchallenged power and influence of Georgia's Orthodox Church, speaking up against the patriarchal remnants of traditions like women's virginity before wedding, marriage, about abortion, and about reproductive and sexual rights. However, as you also asked, Tenzin, everything comes with its own set of risks, and you know, our practices have also come with risks. Relying on autonomous resourcing to implement your own agenda obviously sounds like a dream come true, but it can be limiting when it comes to the scope and reach, because, you know, with limited resources, in our case, I know in Argentina that might be different, comes limited impact, which may often lead some other groups that the movement interacts with or are present in the country to think of these movements as less legitimate, because the scope and reach obviously is smaller, or ineffective in reaching tangible results. So yeah, these have been some of the trade-offs that we've been dealing with. I'll stop here, but would be glad to pick up the conversation later on through questions.
Thank you so much. I mean, that was a phenomenal overview of really concrete examples, from sort of the feminist tour to thinking about autonomous resourcing as a spectrum, from much more day-to-day kind of actions all the way to a much more nuanced, intricate way of thinking about resourcing autonomously. And I love what you were saying about feminist tour and kind of taking back the streets, taking back our shared collective critical history, our knowledge. And I also hear a little bit about, you know, taking back spaces and what resourcing and space have to do with each other, you know. And I think for sort of our feminist reality, space and occupying our shared public spaces it has a long history. And I think when you're talking about small kind of actions around kind of taking, you know, local cafes, I think that's phenomenal. That's where a lot of, you know, conversations and relationship building and conversations all are that's where it's seated. And I love how you're talking about bringing that element in the space of our conversation too. And so that's real. You're giving us so much to think about, and I'm sure folks are also sharing their reflections to your rich comments and experiences. So let's bring in Luti. If you're still there, please share a little bit from Costa Rica, from Beso Diverso's experience about some really concrete examples around autonomous resourcing.
Thank you, Tenzin. No, I'm just listening. I'm really amazed on the scope that our fellow panelists have, and I guess we work kind of in a little smaller scale, but it's very impactful as well. I want to focus on one activity particularly that we do, that I need to give you a little bit of a backstory. Here in Costa Rica, Beso Diverso was born when two girls were kicked out of a restaurant for kissing, basically for showing affection. So they got together with a group of friends and they said, well, if we can have one kiss, then we're gonna take we're gonna flood this restaurant with LGBTQ plus kisses, and ask for a public response, you know, and we tried to give them, also go through the legal channels to to get a legal complaint towards these places, and we do different routes to like open up our services in a way to help people. If they suffer discrimination in any space, they can reach us and we help them out going through the process, right? So we kind of started thinking that we need some resources to be able to fund the speakers and the signs and the materials to go to these places, or even the legal fees that you need to go through to get the public apologies, let's say. So thinking on that, we came up with the idea of taking over spaces, as you were saying, and came up with a party where it's a party, you know, we work through pleasure. So decided to make it a kissable party where everyone could come and kiss, basically. Obviously, we were looking to make it a really safe space, so we have to have a dynamic to protect any harassment or you know, or having consent be very present in the interactions that we were going to have in the party. So as for the funding, we would say that there's a cover, obviously, for the entry of the party. And then inside, representatives of our groups will be selling kisses, and there will be a menu of different kisses. And we were basically hook people up, and they could bid whatever they could pay for that kiss. And of course, it has to be negotiated between the two parts. And all of that then is how we get the funds to keep on going. And it's reached the point that it's also very important for us to take, for example, bars that are normally, you know, very for straight people, and take over so the community come see them, and we create allies, and we also hire people, for example, musicians, and even artistic performances during the parties, and looking for people to be within, very feminist, within allies, and so on and so forth. So since we've been doing this, the first party was in 2011, and we usually do 1, 2, or 2 parties during the year. And as my colleague said before, like it gives us the opportunity to have these funds to have a free agenda, to do whatever like we need, not being confined within a fund's guidelines or steps. And I want to really go back, or resonate in the fact that with the pandemic now, we've been forced to stay home. We cannot gather, and we have to change our mindset, right? There's people struggling from all of this situation. So luckily we have those funds to be able to support our fellow volunteers or our community in this time of need. And there's no buts about it. I mean, we just get together as a group and react immediately and start helping out, since our world changed and now everything is upside down. I guess I can elaborate later on more about this. Any questions are really, really welcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Luti, thank you again so much. And at AWID, we have a wonderful colleague of ours, Maggie, who's also part of Beso Diverso, and we've heard so much about your work, and we keep thinking about the kissing parties, and that's got quite a, you know, strong support from our side in terms of, you know, how do we take this to other places and contexts, because I think it's a really powerful testament about autonomous resourcing in terms of really caring and affection for each other, and how that is very radical, it seems, in many places, you know, and how do we normalize that from, you know, engaging with local, you know, bars for, you know, these kinds of spaces. So so really appreciate that, and bringing in also sort of the artistic performances and what the arts and we don't necessarily, you know, put them in guidelines and agenda and monetize that, but the arts is such a fundamental piece to our imagination and co-creation of what possibilities look like. So it's beautiful how you're able to also bring the art into autonomous resourcing and thinking about that as well. So thank you so much, and really sharing sort of the impact of this current reality we're living in terms of COVID. And so I hope we would be able to share a little bit about how autonomous resourcing and COVID, how that's connecting, because, you know, there's so much relationships and solidarity that's been built over the years that you're able to respond so quickly to the needs of our fellow activists. So thank you for bringing that perspective in as well, Luti. Over to you, Nani, in Jakarta. Tell us a little bit more about all the amazing work you're doing on autonomous resourcing.
Thank you, Tenzin. Thank you, Victoria, Luti, and Eka. It's a very inspiring story. In 2001, when I started initiative organizing women-headed family in Indonesia, I know already from the beginning that we are facing very difficult challenge, because women-headed family in Indonesia is not acceptable both by state, by the law regulation, and also culturally by value system. So it's against all the things. So that's why from the beginning I thought we need to have sustainability resources for the women to start with, and also to continue, because this will be long way, long process movement. So I heard that Victoria says in her place that the cooperative is different from the women, but in Indonesia we started with that, actually mobilize the women own resources, not only in money wise, but also in kind of things, maybe they're produced from the garden and those things to put together as they put it collectively resources, then slowly building the cooperative where they have their own resources for starting micro enterprises at their own and collectively. So with that, then the money among them revolve, while we also process the rebuilding critical awareness, you know, the exercising the invisible and hidden power that they face, and also exercising the role and regulation will make the women-headed family invisible in the whole system. Then, of course, at the beginning, it's not so easy how to ask the poor women to save money, right? But that's why then we encourage them to bring anything they thought is valuable to put collectively as resources where they can use to organize activity with small activities, and then grow it slowly, organizing around the issues that they face in particular area. So up to now, we are so happy, we're glad that this growing. So we are already reaching almost all over Indonesia, where the women-headed family have their own resources. With this co-op, then they develop different type of economic activities. For example, we have Pekka Mart. This is the marketplace which the Pekka community develop for their own, where the women producers sell their products, and then also the other Pekka women will buy. So this kind of exchange economic things, we call it close economic change, yeah, among the women themselves, because we are fighting globalization, economic globalization and capitalism, which reach into almost even in the remote area, in rural areas. So with this collective economic, then collective and solidarity, we call it collective solidarity economic, they maintain their own resources for develop their own livelihood, but also have part of the money to dedicate for education for the women, and also to become, to grow their movement. So they already now they have what they call is women-headed family association, which is very political and grounded with huge membership all over Indonesia, now over 65,000 membership, where they have their own resources through their co-op to develop their micro enterprises, but also have the co-op to support their activity, where they advocate for budget, they advocate for changing on the regulation and data, for example, make them feasible in our system. Because after almost 20 years, finally, we have women-headed family recognized in the government system as one of big community. In every 4 families in Indonesia, actually one headed by women. So this is the world, we call it the world without husband. Is beautiful. So that's the campaign of we have. That's Tenzin. I think for now, then we can.
Yes, no, this is so powerful, Nani. I really appreciated you sort of bringing in sort of the, women farmers and women, rural sort of women's organizing and really kind of taking back their economic power and what you're calling it, sort of the solidarity economy. And that's something that I think feminist cooperatives are really sort of pushing that boundary of how to really build up sort of the solidarity economy from ground up. And what you're saying in terms of 65,000 plus, women-headed families are really sort of consolidating and collectivizing from their, garden and up and growing seeds and growing much more of the economic power. And I think that's such a great testament to sort of the work that you've been, coordinating and leading for a number of decades. So thank you, Nani, so much. So we do have a few minutes before we open up to the Q&A. And I know Dani and Cecile are looking at the Q&A and the chat to bring in some of the audience and the participants' reactions. So while I let Dani and Cecile sort of coordinate that, I will ask one more question before we go to the Q&A. So when we talk about, sort of the autonomous resourcing, what does that really mean for you? I mean, we heard from sort of the word cloud analysis that we did from, 170 plus folks. We hear independence, we hear freedom, and I think really power, right? Feminist power in action, which is what feminist realities is all about for us, the now and the present, not some future possibilities, right? But it is really the now and the urgency of the now. And so I'd love to hear from you in terms of what does autonomous resourcing really mean for you, and whether it really is can be autonomous, and tell us a little bit about what is the autonomous in the autonomous resourcing. So briefly, maybe a minute or two each. I know this is a big question, but we will have a lot of chance in the future to talk more about this as we co-build this this framework together. So before I turn over to Dani and Cecile, I'd love to bring in Luti, Nani, Victoria, Eka, and just tell us a little bit more about what the autonomy and the autonomous resourcing. So we can go with Eka if you're still there. I think I see you. Yep. So
I am. I wouldn't leave unless you kicked me out. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought something went wrong. I mean, I guess when we think of autonomous resourcing, we have to also kind of contrast it with the traditional funding mechanisms, and that's how I think, at least our group thinks, about it. And if then we are thinking of traditional funding mechanisms as the that rely on more formal structures, often asymmetrical formal structures of a donor and a grantee, then it feels like the autonomous resourcing is flipping that structure on its own head and taking the power and putting the power in its own hand, and then hence herein lies its power to emancipate and liberate an aspiration that I'm sure we can all relate to. So for our group, for any group to pursue their own feminist agenda, it means you have a freedom then, without operating in a power structure, to do that outside of these vertical power structures, without necessarily having to check in with, people on the power structure, be it a donor or be it a manager in our organization's case, because we don't have a formal structure, we don't have a, board member or director or anybody. So then it means you just kind of remain flexible to respond to emerging needs or marginal issues that nobody would talk about, or would often be not, would be sensitive topics for donors to allow to talk about, like, challenging the power of church, because that may be the power structure within the country that wouldn't allow, international donors especially to be very openly against, or, the power structures often come with caveats and strings attached. So for us, autonomous resourcing would mean having no strings attached and operating outside the vertical power structures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much, Eka. I love that about how our feminist organizing and resourcing agenda is not in relation to. We're mindful that it exists, the power structures exist, but we're not going to let it influence or define sort of our agenda. We are fully autonomous and independent, and while we acknowledge the power structures that we are sort of operating sort of within, not necessarily within, but to be out of that, but we understand this vertical structure, and I really appreciate that nuance as well. Victoria, Luti, Nani, any few words?
Can I?
Sí, yo creo que la autonomía, la generación de recursos autónomos nos da sobre todo poder, ¿no? El poder de saber que vamos a poder intervenir en la escena pública, vamos a poder poner agenda en la agenda política, vamos a poder lograr avances legales, vamos a poder hacer grandes hechos políticos con nuestra mera organización y nada más. Eso es lo que pienso cuando pienso en la generación autónoma de recursos.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Exactly, our feminist power in action. Luti, if you're there, and Nani?
Yeah, sure. Like, I was thinking that basically, for me, autonomous resourcing is the beginning. I mean, whatever you want to do and start in your activism and whatever, you're gonna need some funds. So naturally, it's starting, and it's on your own blood, sweat, and tears. That's how you get into this, I suppose.
That's beautifully put. I completely agree. It is really that beginning, the origin of our organizing as well. Thank you, Luti, for that clarity. It's really crystallizing in my head also. Nani?
Yeah, for me, autonomous resources means when women have access and control over resources to fund, to support the movement and exercising different layers of power to build a collective power. So I think that means of autonomous resources.
Wonderful, thank you, Nani. Just if you're breaking up a little bit, but we were able to gauge most of what you're saying about access, control, collective power, this shared power around autonomous resourcing. So thank you both. Thank you all so much for these really rich explanations, analysis, stories. It's really such an enriching conversation. So I'd like to bring the audience in and the participants in a little bit. So I'm going to turn over to Dani and Cecile. Please tell us what you're reading, what you're hearing. If there are any questions for our speakers, we're going to spend about 15 minutes. for the Q&A. So over to you, Dani.
Muchísimas gracias, Tenzin. Muchísimas gracias, compañeras, por compartir sus experiencias. Voy a leer algunas de las preguntas y comentarios que aparecieron en el chat y también en el cuadrito de preguntas y respuestas que encuentran en el menú de su Zoom. Mientras hablamos y respondemos, también les invitamos a seguir usando el chat para compartir sus propias experiencias en materia de movilización de recursos autónomos. Tenemos muchas ganas de escucharles y seguir aprendiendo. Voy a empezar con una pregunta que está en el chat, pero antes también mencionar que han habido muchísimos comentarios agradeciendo y apreciando esta oportunidad de conocer todas estas experiencias con los desafíos y los logros que han tenido. Hay una pregunta de Susmita, y pido disculpas si no pronuncio bien los nombres. Voy a leer las preguntas en el idioma que esté. Sé que esto no es ideal para las intérpretes, así que ahí me tienen paciencia. Susmita nos pregunta, one of the speakers said by your own suite, but in order to begin, you need some support. So what could be that support? What is the kind of support that we need? Y ahora voy a leer algunas de las preguntas que están en el cuadro de preguntas y respuestas. Mariana nos comenta si hay herramientas, experiencias o ejemplos concretos de movilización autónoma de recursos en contextos donde hay alta inestabilidad o precariedad o en contextos de crisis humanitaria. Y hubieron también varios comentarios sobre esto en el chat, indicando de cómo se le hace para adaptar esto en particulares contextos. Hay otra más, también en concreto vinculando y hablando de contextos complejos, de cómo se adapta y cómo reflexionamos sobre este tipo de experiencias en el marco COVID y post-COVID, donde los desafíos son mayores, como nos comenta Carmen. Alejandra de Venezuela nos pregunta, le gustaría saber si hay experiencias de articulación entre organizaciones feministas de diferentes territorios para generar estos recursos autónomos. Y ahora voy a leer algunos de las preguntas que están en inglés con mi acento, así que paso al inglés. Espero que se entiendan. Pueden leer también las preguntas en el Q&A, sobre todo las panelistas, para luego contestar. So PQ Match said, we think a lot about unpaid work and try to pay our organizers, speakers, some sort of honorarium, etc., because women have so much unpaid work. So it puts a pressure to us and source of cash, which means we wave into sponsorships, which sometimes is problematic. So what's your thought about that? Dina mentioned a question, so how do we advance this discussion on autonomous resources without increasing a burden on feminist activists to feel that they have to do the extra work to dismantle patriarchy and also look for the resources within them, their family, friends, and the community for that work. Oftentimes these are already unpaid or not paid of their labor, so very connected questions. There is another question from Fidelis. If there is a way we can have autonomous resourcing for a specific organization, example, we select the number of members and share the need. Sorry, that's move. I lost it. I'm sorry. And share the need and seek funding for them on a mailing basis. So maybe I can stop here for a little while, and Tenzin, you can help distributing the question with our wonderful panelists. While then, we encourage you to keep writing your comment, question, suggestion, reactions in the channel, and the questions especially in the Q&A box. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dani. We are so grateful that you are here and you're bringing your multilingual expertise and skills to truly facilitate and in 3 languages. So really appreciate that. So we're hearing a few questions around really, you know, when you start autonomous resource or starting your organizing in the beginning, and I think Luti said that beautifully, what kind of support do we need? What is that? Where do we start? How do we begin? So I will summarize a little bit again because we have limited time. So feel free to answer any of these questions that resonate with you, Victoria, Eka, Nani, and Luti. Also around the complex context and framework in humanitarian crises, like how, what does autonomous resourcing mean? I think I have some thoughts, but I want to hear from all of you in you know, really more complex sort of humanitarian context. And then there was a question about, you know, paid, unpaid work and what does that mean? And I think we can definitely, at least from, I can say a bit about sort of the work that we're doing at Resourcing Feminist Movements, where we are really trying to hold a much more a complex, nuanced framework of resourcing ecosystems, where we are acknowledging that while we need to survive in a hyper brutal sort of capitalistic system, we do have to survive, and we need to acknowledge that. And hence, we've been at AWID for decades with all kinds of evidence and rigorous analysis that needs to be said again and again. You know, that that we need more and better funding for feminist movements, and that's been our sort of you know, agenda for a number of decades. But now we're also feeling sort of like, well, there is so much that is there in terms of feminist resourcing our own organizing that we need to really name and claim that. So that's the kind of spirit I think we're bringing and the intention we're bringing, not to say this doesn't exist and we need to, you know, not think about sort of the broader funding ecosystems, and we absolutely must push for that agenda. But that is again a complicated, you know, we've got amazing feminist funds and gender justice funds that are pushing for that and advocating, and we have I have a wonderful colleague at AWID Kasha who's been really spearheading that advocacy. But we also want to hold and sort of take back and name and claim sort of the feminist power that, you know, that is inherent in our organizing and resourcing through, like Luti said, our blood, sweat, and tears from the beginning. So this is the spirit we're coming into. So I'd love to hear from our speakers, you know, any reactions to some of these comments and questions. So I will open it up. I see Victoria raising her hand. So Victoria, go ahead.
Sí, gracias. No, muy interesante el debate. Yo creo que, bueno, lo que nos pasó a nosotras, por ejemplo, este año fue que ante este momento tan difícil que estamos atravesando, lo primero que hay que hacer es hablar, juntarse con otras compañeras y ver de qué manera podemos responder. Y creo que todo el eje de este año fue la solidaridad con las mujeres que la están pasando peor. Y nosotras empezamos a hacer campañas de donaciones. Logramos, con pequeños montos, logramos juntar $2.000 para comprar productos de gestión menstrual para repartir en los barrios y en los comedores. Creo que este año nos cambió el eje de todo, y nuestro esfuerzo militante estuvo ahí, en dar una mano en los comedores barriales, en dar una mano solidaria a las mujeres que lo están pasando peor, siempre de manera organizada, ¿no? Siempre buscando cómo organizarnos mejor, qué aportes teníamos cada una para hacer, qué ideas. Así que bueno, este año fue especial.
Thank you, Victoria. And Nani, Eka, Luti, and please do check out Noe's beautiful artwork. She's producing some wonderful sketches of our speakers, so make sure you are taking a look at that.
Yeah, and I would like to, oh, okay, Luti.
Go, Nani, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm interested on bringing the discussion on whether, I think one question that I read on Q&As, whether autonomous resources mean we don't get any funding from others, something like that. If just I use my own what you call it, on sentences. I think one thing that I understand about this economy, even though at the beginning I don't call it autonomous resources, but when we build the movement, it's very important to, at the beginning, at the starting point, we are independent from any intervention. So with that, we can really sharpening our agenda and be independent from all interventions, so we don't depend on others. But one of the agenda of the movement, I think, is to really exercise the power to then have access and control over resources that we have the right on. For example, during this COVID, the Pekka movement, they really exercise the government program on social protection by claiming their rights. So I think it's also part of the autonomous. It's not like we don't want money from it, but how we claim it is our right, because as citizen, as the most marginalized women in Indonesia, as the poorest of the poor in Indonesia, the biggest resources available for them is through the government system, where they have been discriminated for a long time. So using their own funding through their micro, small enterprises collectively, and also through the co-op, then they try to exercise that. So then they have the bigger access to overcome the COVID, which affect their economic life and also health and also all the security and other things. I think that's what I want to bring into that conversation, this perspective. Thank you, Tenzin.
Thank you, Nani. I think, was it Luti or Eka,
Yeah.
you wanted to say something?
If I can go on, Eka, if that's okay. I would like to take the question of how to start. I mean, it's difficult knowing the different, like, what environment are you in and what necessities do you have and all that. But what I would recommend is know the group or know the skills that you possess and try to encourage these skills. I don't know, maybe to give it a more of a concrete example is in our case, we have a lot of social workers and we have a lot of psychologists in the group, and so they have the know-how, let's say, for the social activism part, but they were lacking a little bit of in administration, in managing funds, in getting organized, in setting up dates and events and so on. So you can, like, if you need someone, then you can ask help maybe from other organizations, or resources don't necessarily mean that you need money. You just need help, basically. So maybe if you have in your community someone that possesses those skills, and I think maybe who was it? I think Eka was talking about if you know someone who's a photographer to help you out in the event, or if you know, or if your friend owns a cafeteria, or you start little by little, and then you start getting a little more exposure, and soon you'll see you start getting the funds you need.
Thank you, Luti. Eka?
Yes, I think I also wanted to build on that, Luti. I guess, setting your own feminist agenda is the freedom that you should really value, and start thinking about autonomous resourcing as a value that, and as a value of freedom, in a way, valuing freedom. And while there might be risks involved in it, as I was speaking earlier, full-time investment in movement building, like Victoria was talking about, can offset offset those risks, you know, because obviously women before us have very skillfully done that, you know, including in Argentina. But, you know, understanding those risks would also be one of the important things for feminist movements who are starting to do something would have to do. Because the world has also very much changed and is very much changing. You know, there are newer risks that the movements around the world are now facing. There is a way stronger backlash to feminist movements than it has ever been before. There is also, you know, increased disinformation and polarization and right-wing politics that are these threats that are like, you know, are bringing their heavy guns in, as well as, you know, the social media, which can be an ally to a lot of feminist movements and a lot of other movements and activists, but can also be, you know, a soft spot, can exploit our vulnerabilities, like be it cyber attacks, you know, speaking from our group's perspective, privacy violations, as well as, you know, kind of creating the movement into echo chambers that often happen. So with all of that kind of a, you know, risks that are there, I would obviously value, our group values the autonomous resourcing because it's gives us so much freedom to set our own agenda. So if I were to give, you know, tips and suggestions to whoever is starting now, I would suggest that, you know, groups start with something small to just get a hang of it. It could be as small as, I don't know, screening a movie, or bringing even women that think like you together to talk about what you guys want. Maybe, and yeah, the other factor I think, which is very hard for our brain to wrap sometimes, is to focus on the agenda and not on the limitations of resources and funding, because we've somehow grown up and you know, everything around us talks about in terms of resources and delegitimizes the importance of agenda and what you want to do. So I think keeping focused on the agenda is if not more important, as equally important as resources, because that's what will drive you. And then, you know, having dry spells for a month or two is fine because you know that there is agenda that you're pursuing. And, you know, a third point would be to kind of like stick with your vision and voice, even if it's small and weak, because the world does not and should not belong to only strong and powerful voices and vision. So, yeah.
That's yes, we're all applauding to that, Eka. Well, I love that you're able to pull us back into sort of our broader reality and the larger context and the larger forces that really are influencing and shifting in terms of the context that we are all sort of in right now. So thank you for bringing us to sort of how to begin, and the origin really starts with your own voice, however small you may feel, but it is worthy, and that we should start there and setting that agenda with others, and that collectivization is really important, and not to focus only on sort of the limitations, but really start with what is our agenda and connect with others. And I also love, Nani, what you were saying about claiming our rightful resources as well, claiming it, and it is rightful. And I think many times as we're, you know, advocating for resources, sometimes we lose that, and I think that's a really important part of autonomous resourcing frame, is that we are naming all of these by talking about it, and we're claiming it together. And I think this has been such a powerful conversation, and hopefully not the end, but really the beginning of something truly remarkable that we are able to sort of, as feminist movements and activists around the world, that we're able to really collectively claim this power that is really within, that starts from our movements internally. So I'm mindful of our time. I want to quickly go over to Kimberly, who will be sharing with us a little bit of our third poll to see how everyone's feeling now. So Kimberly, over to you, how you're doing over there.
Thank you, Tenzin, and thanks everyone. There were so many amazing questions and comments in the chat and the Q&A. And we just want to thank everyone for engaging and being present. Unfortunately, we were not able to answer all of the questions, but we invite you to continue joining our curated conversations, and hopefully as these unfold, we'll be able to address some of those questions and comments. So we have our final poll. We want to hear from all of you. How are you feeling about autonomous resourcing? The first poll we launched, we asked you what you knew about autonomous resourcing or if you knew anything at all. And so hopefully now with this poll, maybe we'll see a difference. So I'm going to read the questions out to assist the interpreters. After today's call, how are you feeling about autonomous resourcing? 1, I think that autonomous resourcing is cool. I want to try it out. 2, it is complicated. Let me sit on it for a while. 3, tell me more. I'm interested in learning, exchange, and future skill shares. And 4, we've been doing this for decades. It is time to claim our feminist power. So use the poll to indicate your responses. And it looks like we have quite a number of folks who are saying they are definitely interested in learning more and would like to participate in future skill shares and exchanges, which is really exciting. And there are definitely some folks who are saying we've been doing this for decades. And so not only is it time, but we need to continue claiming and reclaiming our feminist power. So thank you so much, everyone, for engaging. And we're really excited to hear that you're interested in learning more as the curated conversations unfold, but also as Tenzin and the team doing this really critical work continue to work with partners. So Tenzin, I will pass it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. That was really cool to see that folks are, feeling really strongly about the skills shared today, and that you're interested in learning more about it. So I feel the same way. So thank you so much. We are now, a few minutes to our closing. So I want to give a quick last minute to all the speakers and Kimberly to say if you are inspired to say anything, your last few words before we go to closing. So Victoria, Nani, Luti, and Eka, really quick, one sentence. How are you feeling now?
Start.
Very excited.
I'm enlightened from all the conversation.
That's beautiful.
Me siento muy entusiasmada y espero que podamos seguir estos debates y muy agradecida también.
Wonderful, thank you, thank you.
And I was going to say that I'm inspired and very much look forward to continuing this conversation with the same panel and learning, meeting other women around the world. This is truly
thank you.
Not necessarily revolutionary, but very exciting. As we were saying earlier, these practices have been back in our history. So we are just reclaiming what has been done by other women before us, and we are just continuing that journey. So yeah, glad to continue.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Eka. And Luti and Noe and Kimberly, any last words? I think Noe is doing some beautiful sketching over there. We will be bringing them into our illustrations and future knowledge products. So you will be seeing these sketches in full form soon. So I think if we don't have any last words, I will say that our next steps would be please join our conversations on our social media, on Feminist Realities #, autonomous resourcing #. You can, of course, email me at tdolker@awid.org if you want to share any examples and share your feelings. I would like to thank all the speakers and the AWID team, the beautiful AWID family, Ali, Cecile, Dani, Fenya, Gabi, Ina, Jui, Kasha, Kalia, who was our ex-manager, who's really helped us think through autonomous resourcing, Kami, Maggie, Ritu, all the interpreters, Maria, Nadine, Iris, and Noe. Thank you all so much. This was, early hours, and we really, really appreciate it. And Kimberly for stepping in so beautifully. With that, we're gonna go to our last poll, our beloved Prince, and we're gonna listen to some inspiring music to see how you're feeling right now. So Cecile will play this song. We do have this last poll. So Ritu, we wanna bring back the last image and the poll to see how you're all feeling with the Prince activity. So let's see if you can tell us now, how inspired are you? How are you feeling? So let's see, we'll take 30 seconds. I think we can launch the poll. So let's see if you're feeling, sassy, fun, excited, rock and roll. What's your mood like right now after this, as you start your day, end your day? Let's hear. Okay, so a lot of folks are number 2. Yes, love that. So okay, so we're all feeling, different variations of Prince's mood. That's beautiful. Okay, number 2. I love it. Thank you, Nino, if you're listening, for this wonderful activity. So in closing, please take this short survey we have that Cecile is sharing on chat, the link. When you close your Zoom browser, it should take you to a Survey Monkey. We want to hear from you to see how you're feeling and whether this curated conversation skills share was useful. We're going to build it into future exchanges and our research and our future autonomous resourcing activities. And so you can stay on for a few more minutes as you take the survey, as you listen to this last music. And with that, over to Cecile as she plays the next song. And thank you. Have a great day, evening. Thank you for joining. So let's listen to the music as we close, as everyone start to log off. And we do have the Survey Monkey in English, Spanish, and French. So thank you, everybody. And we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Tenzin.
And you're welcome to dance a little bit if you're interested. So the music is going, you can take the survey, and you're welcome to log off. Thank you, everybody, for joining. This was such a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Tenzin, Victoria, Luti.
Thank you, Nani. We'll be in touch offline. Thank you for the interpreters. Really appreciate this. And Noe for this beautiful.
Thank you all AWID family. Miss you all. It has been a long time.
Thank you. Cecile, the music is a little bit low, but we can still hear the queen. So
Can we have the
yes, turn it up. I think Kami's saying turn it up.
Can we have the sketch? It's very wonderful sketch.
Yes, I can't wait to see what Noe has produced. So thank you. Yeah, the music is still a little low, but we can. There you go. If anyone's still listening, we do have AWID Spotify, and we have a soundtrack for the curated skills shared today with Rihanna from all the other songs and music that our wonderful colleagues have shared. So you can follow AWID on Spotify and check out our playlist on autonomous resourcing. So thank you, everybody. With that, I think I will close the meeting and we'll see you all very soon. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.